We've got to now to a point where we're saying, okay, it's not all in the brain, it's not all in the body, it's in the complex interaction between the two. So you've got signals going to the brain, you've got the brain predicting what's happening in the body, you've got the outside world feeding into this, and it's constantly kind of churning around, going back and forth, and then the meaning that comes out of it comes out of the whole thing. So, but it has been neglected because there's a lot of things that are considered to be mental issues, brain-based issues, anxiety, panic disorder, even things like pain. You know, sometimes people say, oh, the pain is in the brain. Well, it's in the interaction between the brain and the body. And there's also things that are to do with the body, like IBS, that are exacerbated by stress. And so that's, rather than thinking of it as a stomach issue or a brain issue or a stress issue, it's all of those things. And so there's now a drive towards trying to understand this sort of back and forth conversation, body brain as a whole system is where we're going. And it's really, really genuinely an important time in science.
What if the most important sense you have is one you didn't even know existed? We're constantly told to move more, train smarter, listen to our bodies. But what if we've been listening to the wrong signals? Today I'm joined by science journalist Caroline Williams, whose new book, Inner Sense, uncovers the hidden world of interoception, the sense that tells us what's happening inside our bodies. From why top negotiators and traders rely on gut feelings to how we can unlock emotional resilience, we're diving into a new and different side of movement. If you've ever wanted to feel more in tune with yourself or just understand why your body sometimes seems to work against you, this episode is for you. Welcome, Caroline. You are my first ever returning guest on the Make Movement Matter podcast, and you were my very first episode as well.
So, I know. I'm honoured. That's lovely.
It's great to have you back, and that was a really successful conversation that's been listened to by lots of people. And I am sure everyone's going to really enjoy today's conversation because it's a fascinating topic. You have just written a book, which is pre-selling at the moment, called The Inner Sense, How the New Science of Interoception Can Transform Your Health. So the big word in there, which we're going to learn a lot more about today, interoception. So let's get a description off the bat. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a tricky word, and it doesn't do justice to just how fascinating and important it is. So it sounds like it's been made up by an accountant or something. But interoception, it's a catch-all term for the way we make sense of the signals that originate inside the body. So everything from hunger, heartbeat, how much energy we've got, whether we're feeling pleasure, pain, and all these sensations come from the inside of the body, and they're increasingly being understood as a foundation for how we think and feel. They fit into our emotions, into our motivations, into decisions that we make, because, you know, everything from gut feelings to whether we're feeling danger or safety and comfort and all these kinds of things. And basically, these are sensations that evolved for a purpose, which was to help us survive in the world. So they give us some information about what we need to do. So they tend to be the ones we can feel anyway, tend to be ones that we notice when there's something that needs to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say, because even a lot of people don't even have perhaps not even heard of the word, that it's something that's been really overlooked until now. Would that be true to say?
Definitely. Yeah. So it's not, so the first description of or interoceptive sensations was like in 1900, but then it was sort of considered to be sort of slow, sort of information that the brain would then use. So this was kind of just like reflexes and stuff, you know, just senses and stuff, and then the brain made sense of it all. And there have been a few movements over the years towards so like there's the James Lang theory of emotion, whereby, you know, you make meaning on your body sensations, and that, so you don't feel scared and then your heart races, you feel scared because your heart's racing. So that came around a while back, and then that sort of went out of fashion again. And it's for the last, I guess, 50 years, neuroscience has been all about what happens in the head. You know, all the good stuff happens in the brain. And then those sort of two extremes have started to come back together. So we've got now to a point where we're saying, okay, it's not all in the brain. It's not all in the body. It's in the complex interaction between the two. So you've got signals going to the brain. You've got the brain predicting what's happening in the body. You've got the outside world feeding into this. And it's constantly kind of churning around, going back and forth. And then the meaning that comes out of it comes out of the whole thing. So, but it has been neglected because there's a lot of things that are considered to be sort of mental issues, brain-based issues, anxiety, panic disorder, even things like pain. You know, sometimes people say, oh, well, the pain is in the brain. Well, it's in the interaction between the brain and the body.
Yeah.
And there's also things that are to do with the body, like IBS, that are exacerbated by stress. And so that's, rather than thinking of it as a stomach issue or a brain issue or a stress issue, it's all of those things. And so there's like now a drive towards trying to understand this sort of back and forth conversation, body brain, as, and not even as them being two separate things, right? They're sort of a part of the same thing. The brain emerged from the body to help keep the body alive.
Yes.
So trying to understand this as a whole system is where we're going. And it's really, really genuinely an important time in science.
Absolutely. And we had psychiatrists on here who talked about the separation between the brain and the body, or discussion about it coming from the fact that they were two separate disciplines in psychiatry. And that sort of almost created a separation in the discussion around it, which we then almost took on as a complete separation. But you're right. Obviously, if we didn't have a brain, and our brains are so big because of our movement levels and because of the way our body functions, because it's so complex. So absolutely, of course, it's an absolute interaction, but it's like we haven't got one word that encompasses body and brain.
No, and it's quite annoying because, you know, I'm writing about it a lot, and you do find yourself saying body and brain, or body including the brain, or you don't want to say things like body mind or brain mind. You know, there's no good word for it. Maybe there is in a different language. I don't know.
Maybe we could try brody.
Brody.
Well, I mean, you know, let's come up with some.
Yeah, it needs to be. Yeah, corpus. I don't know. There's a word to be coined.
There is a word to be coined, and it's going to be a good one, but that was not it. So tell me, what first sort of sparked your interest that made you think I need to go off and research this? Because when you write a book, you go through a fascinating non-desk, well, obviously there's desk-based work in it, but you go on a real journey to discover and really get under the skin of the issue. So what first prompted you to start writing about it?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like a gradual kind of movement. So, you know, I've been, writing about the neuroscience and the brain and psychology for, 25 years this year. And, that led me to move where, like, hang on a minute, yes, some things that you do your body affect how you think and feel. Why is that? It's more than just endorphins. That's what move was all about. And then you start thinking, okay, well, why does movement affect the way you think and feel? Well, because interoception, because it's changing the signals from your body to your brain, and then it's changing how your brain then what the brain expects to happen from within your body. And so I started looking into that, and it turns out there's this whole world of stuff, everything from what does it mean to feel like we have energy to the way we know when we're full or hungry, and why comfort eating, why we overeat, because these signals are all intertwined. So there's just this whole world of even what we know about what is health as opposed to being the absence of disease. It's vitality and all of this is built from these signals. And so there's lots of different people working in lots of different areas. And also, you've got the rise of the vagus nerve. Everyone's talking about the vagus nerve. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But what is that all about? And that's a major interoceptive superhighway. There was a lot to go at, and a lot of really interesting research into mental health disorders, body-brain disorders. Lots to go at. And also, unusually for something that's so new in science, it's actually something that seems to be responsive to fairly simple interventions, and could really make an impact to day-to-day life right now. So it's kind of, this doesn't happen very often in science. You sort of, you sort of see in the media, breakthrough here, breakthrough
Yes.
there, change in perspective. And it's actually quite rare that something new like that comes along. But I was going to sort of emotion conferences, and people were saying, "Oh, interoception, I don't know much about that. Tell me more." It was in the sidelines, slowly taking over the content of the conference. So it's starting to become a really
Yeah.
big thing.
And I think it's because the very nature of it being so entirely holistic. And that's
Mm.
a really hard thing for you to go off and research and then package in one book. But we were saying before, and I said, I'll keep it for the conversation. I love the way you do that because you make it really digestible for the common man like me, woman, um,
The
and
common
relates,
woman.
common woman, and really relatable. And it makes so much sense. And the way you do that is by demonstrating through, you take us through the journey of what you discovered in a sense. And that really helps because it's like bits of a jigsaw that all add up. By the end, you can see the full picture much more clearly. So tell us, I'd love you to give us a couple of examples of a couple of the things you did for your research. If you could start with the flotation tank, because I think that's a really great way of people understanding what it means to tune in, because there's this whole
Mhm.
conversation always, there's a lot of narrative around listen to your body. There's a lot of discussion around meditation and what's happening in your brain, and then what you feel contact, focusing on your breath and so on. But that example was a really, really good one. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so flotation therapy, it's sort of, it was actually designed by a neuroscientist a long time ago because the theory at the time was, well, if the human brain is starved of all external stimulation, it will just switch off. You'll be unconscious, and you won't know anything about it until we let you out again. And so, to answer that, whether that was right or not, a scientist who's a very colourful character invented this flotation tank. And it turns out that people didn't lose consciousness. So without external stimulation, what happens is, so in a flotation tank, you are floating in very salty water, like a sort of shallow bath
Mm.
that's sort of more salty than the Dead Sea. So it holds your weight sort of completely effortlessly. You're just lying on the surface. And you're in darkness, you wear earplugs, like there's nothing to feel because the water is the same temperature as your skin. So you can't even feel where the water begins and ends. So it feels like you're floating in space. It's amazing. I love it.
I'd love to have a try. I haven't tried that. Yeah.
Yeah, I really recommend it. A lot of people think, oh, I wouldn't like it because I'm, claustrophobic, but you kind
No,
of, you
give it a
don't,
try.
you can always leave the
Yeah.
lid open anyway. So what happens when you're in that situation where there's nothing to feel, nothing to hear, nothing to see, is that your brain goes inwards. And as I found out the first time I did it, you think, oh, this would be a nice bit of a break from the world, bit of peace and quiet. Actually, there's an awful lot going on in the body that you suddenly are aware of. So you feel your heart beating, you hear it, like, not at first actually, because not everyone can, some people can feel it and hear it more easily than others. But it took me a little while. But then you can feel your heartbeat, but you feel it in a way that is not how you normally feel it. It's not the banging away in your chest because you've run up the stairs. It's
Mm.
not because you're scared. It's just there, and it's the most comforting thing. It's just like, just there, just doing its thing, and it's like lovely. And I found that I felt like my limbs from the inside. So I kind of felt that my legs were strong and weightless. It was a bit like if people do yoga and you've done a hard yoga class and you lie down in Savasana and corpse pose at the end and you just melt into the mat. It's like that, but on steroids. But this is a really interesting thing because people are using that to see how it helps people to feel, particularly in things like anxiety, to feel their heartbeat in a safe.
Yeah.
And then you can learn to trust your body as a safe place to be if
Yeah.
you don't have that experience. And there's also experiments in doing it with people with eating disorders where, because while it increases your sensitivity to your heartbeat, it decreases sensitivity to gut sensations. So in people with anorexia, for example, the sensation of having food in the stomach can be really uncomfortable, and it's just like, oh, I can't bear it, it's awful. So people have been trialing, eating and then going in the tank where you feel weightless, and then that whole discomfort thing happens and you don't notice it, and then you can get out again. So there's all kinds of really interesting research going on with flotation tanks, also to do with states of consciousness and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of come full circle. So from being I think it was the 50s or 60s it was invented for neuroscience, and it's sort of morphed into a relaxation therapy for high-end spas, and there's a few flotation centers around the country, and now it's going back into research.
Yeah.
Because it's a really interesting way to say, okay, well, this is how you become more sensitive to some signals, less to other, but you're in yourself. You're in yourself in the moment. And it's sort of like mindfulness, but mindfulness of what are you mindful of?
Yeah.
Are you mindful of your body sensations?
And so that's a really good example of listening to your body. And that's a really common thing, as people say, to listen to your body. But some people can listen to their body more, and some people can less.
Mm-hmm.
Even down to feeling whether sort of muscles are activated when they move at all. There's always a lot of discussion around, are your glutes firing?
Yeah.
And some people say, I just can't feel them. And with that comes the concern that the glute isn't firing properly or at all. And yet it might not be about that. It might be about their ability to interocept, not quite right.
Yeah,
Their interoceptual level, however we want
yeah,
to say it.
interoceptive awareness. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, one thing I should probably say is it's tempting to think that what everybody needs is to be more sensitive to their body sensations, but that's not necessarily the case. It's a little bit more complicated in that. So there are some things, for example, like eating disorders, you can become hypersensitive to stomach sensations. People who have heart arrhythmias that they know nothing about until they're diagnosed can become hyper focused onto their heart, and then to the point where people don't want to leave the house, and because every time they feel anything to do with their heart they panic, and it turns into a panic attack. So it's not quite as simple as being more sensitive. So there's a great researcher called Sarah Garfinkel who's done she's done a huge amount of the work in interoception, and what her research suggests is that you need to be able to precisely work out what the signal is. So you need to be able to tune in and feel it, right? But it's not just that simple. It's a bit like it's the equivalent of sort of potty training yourself, but for other things. So that's an example of interoceptive learning, right? You know that sensation means I need to go to the loo. You go to the loo, you deal with it, you come back, you get on with your day. So we almost need that for other things as well. So you might notice your heart racing, you think, okay, put that into context with what's going on in the moment, then you can ignore it and get on with your day. So it's about the perception as well as the sensation. So you don't want to be too much in, because one of the things that's come out of research is that you can either be focused inward or you can be focused on the world. And the way Sarah Garfinkel says is that you basically want your focus, it's healthy to be out on the world, but you need to be able to tap into this information and then get back to the world.
Right.
So it's like a source of information. You don't want to ignore it. You don't want to over-index on it. You just have a nice, comfortable back and forth between your body and the world and what it all means.
And have there been any studies about people's levels of connection with their interoception?
Yes. Yeah. So it does vary a lot. And it seems to vary depending on the sense. So just as you can have great hearing and rubbish eyesight, you can be really tuned into your stomach, but not your stomach, but not your heart, to your energy levels, but nothing, not your pain. And these things can all fluctuate. But there's a questionnaire called the MAIA, MAIA, which asks you a series of questions about how often you feel your body sensations, and things like, I notice when I'm feeling worried, I notice when I'm tired, that kind of thing. And it sort of splits them down into awareness, self-regulation, understanding, trusting. So when you feel something in your body, do you trust it or do you go, nah? Do you override it and crack on even if you feel exhausted, or do you take heed of that? This MAIA questionnaire, you can find copies of it online. It's quite interesting to do, to see where you stand. I was kind of I was kind of average on everything apart from self-regulation, which I thought was quite interesting. So I'm less good at saying, okay, right, and what I need to do now
I
is do
need to
some deep breathing and calm
stop it.
down.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
I'm really, really lethargic, and what I need to do is go out for a walk. That's where I fall down, it
Yeah.
seems.
Well, I find that area particularly fascinating because having had the situation in my life where I was in chronic pain for a long time, and hearing what you're saying about sort of over connecting
Mhm.
with what's going on, that was, looking back, that was the pattern, was that I was far too regularly inside my body, subconsciously almost. It was almost like my brain would do it for me, checking in on how's the pain right now, right
Yeah,
now, right now,
yeah.
right now, over and over and over. And it was so much harder to then come out of that. And since then, I have, without knowing any of this, linked and talked about before the fact that I see myself as quite a sensitive person. And I can see the link between the two.
Mhm.
So I would love to do that test, actually,
Yeah.
because it would probably, there may have been a reason that I got into chronic pain versus someone else.
Yes. Well, so there's an interesting so chronic pain is definitely comes into this. And there's a type of chronic pain that's only recently been recognized by the sort of official pain bodies, and is still not that well known in medicine. So it's called nociplastic pain. So it's a third kind of pain. So there's nociceptive pain, which is what you will think of, that there's an injury, something has
Yeah.
gone wrong, and it's a signal, the nerve going, right, something has to be done here. Then there's also neuropathic pain, which is that the pathways that are sort of between one bit in the brain are firing, they've gone wrong, they've been injured or something like
That's
that.
what I thought I had. Yeah.
They carry on. But there's a third kind, which is neither of those things, where the sort of the sensation of pain is almost got unhooked from the checks and balances, where and that can be set off from an injury. It can come along with things like osteoarthritis and chronic conditions like that. It can just happen for no apparent reason. It can come along with things like IBS as well, and it's exactly how you describe. So it might say it comes from an injury, and then you become sort of hypersensitized for whatever reason, whether it's because you're focusing in on it, whether it's because something else,
It's
but
both.
that
Yeah.
danger signal is there. And then after a while, those sort of furrows become more and more deepened, and sometimes in really severe cases it can be like even emotional pain can be determined as a threat, and then that can make the pain flare up. And it's really hard to treat because this is kind of pain where people will say, oh, well, it's all in the mind. Well, it's not really. It's in the fact that this loop has somehow got interrupted. And so the treatments that tend to work for that, and it sounds like you've sort of done it to yourself, is that things, the biopsychosocial model of pain, which is it's partly biological, it's partly psychological, and it's partly social. So to be able to, you can deal with more pain if you feel supported and safe. In some studies, like there's a really interesting study where they did pain reprocessing therapy, where they got people to look to understand pain better in the context of this model, and they compared it to usual care. And 66% of the people who had this new treatment, more holistic treatment, were pain-free or nearly pain-free afterwards. 10% of people on usual care were. But the really interesting thing that I thought was that they had a placebo arm where they just injected people with saline, told them it was a placebo, explained how placebos sometimes work, and they describe it as an empathic encounter. And 20% of those people were pain-free or nearly pain-free afterwards. So that's twice as good as standard care. And all you're doing is kind of...
And they knew it was a placebo.
Yeah. So sometimes even if you know that, honest placebos are really interesting, because even if you know, there's something about that encounter where you're saying, oh, look, because placebos work because the body-brain, signals.
That's the next book, Caroline. That is the next
book.
Oh,
God. I can't. Yeah, we'll have to see. Ask me in a couple of years. But,
no,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, really fascinating. And actually, so not keep bringing it back to me, but yes, biological. I did body work. I had to readjust myself. I had to retrain my movement patterns to go right back to early developmental movement patterns. I had to then, it only started shifting and improving when I started to think about the way I saw myself in the world. So there was that element too. What was the third one? I forgot.
Biopsychosocial. So yeah,
And then social, I think, was definitely, again, me not comparing my movement to the world around me and just being grateful that I could move, and trying to slightly in that just ignore the pain. And a doctor, when I had my scan, and she said, there's nothing structurally wrong with you, which made me laugh and cry. But she still said, if you go out and move, you're not re-injuring yourself. So that was a sort of a context of actually you are safe, that I didn't feel before. So so fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's really fascinating. And so, that kind of takes it out of the realms of, oh, you're imagining it, or, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. No, there are three parts of this puzzle, and all of them need to be, you need to re-educate your sort of body that this is safe, and you need to know that you're safe, and then that gradually can undo the damage.
Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10-minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. And before we move forward, I've just got to ask you to share a little bit about the vibrating pill experiment.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's so good. Before I forget about it.
Yeah, it's very funny. So I went to, there's a great researcher, he's called Sahib Khalsa, and he was at Tulsa University at the time. And now he's in LA. But anyway, he invited me to his lab where they have flotation tanks. They have all mod cons, including they've been developing vibrating pills. And so they're investigating sort of, gut feelings are really fascinating. And the sensations we have from our guts, they tell us whether we're full. They tell us whether we're safe and warm and cozy. They tell us, in the fight or flight reaction, they tell us whether there's immediate danger. There's a lot going on, and it all gets mashed in together. And sometimes these messages can get crossed. So what they've done, they've got this pill. It's about, I suppose it's about that big, a sort of white capsule. I'll put a picture on the socials of it at some point, taking it. Must. And they put a load of electrodes on your stomach. And in the actual real experiments, they did it on they put electrodes on people's brains as well. We didn't do that for me because we weren't doing the full experiment. But you swallow the capsule. So they put it on a activator. There's a battery inside and a little motor.
You know what it makes me think of? When you go to a restaurant and they give you a thing to say your order's ready?
Yes, it is a bit like that, but tiny, right? And then you have to swallow it. And I sort of I scared the poor research assistants who had been given the task of giving me this thing. I was choking because it was my own fault. I just kind of inhaled the water and they were going, oh my God, we've killed the journalist. No, it's fine. I'm just an idiot. Anyway, so it goes down. And then it feels like you have swallowed a tiny phone on vibrate and somebody keeps calling you and then hanging up. And all you have to do, so they give you a little button and there's two settings. So there's a buzz that feels like an angry fly in your stomach that wants to get out. And the other one is just is that buzzing? I'm not really sure. Sort of a light one. And you have to press the button when you become aware of it and then let go when it stops. Okay. So it's to see how sensitive you are to the sensations from within your gut. And when they did it with the proper experiment with the brain electrodes, what's happening in the brain. So there's a special network in the brain, specific network called the gastrointestinal network. Anyway, hang on. Anyway, GRP, and
Okay.
and it kind of becomes active. It kind of keeps a track of what's going on in your gut. So they found that there is a specific network that keeps track of what's going on in your gut, and that some people are more sensitive to others. And so the idea is they're looking at this with people with eating disorders, whether that's anorexia or binge eating disorder, two completely opposite ends of the spectrum. One's very sensitive, one's not so sensitive to stomach sensations, and see if you can actually, eventually, what they'd like to do is be able to train people to be more or less sensitive to these signals, right?
Yeah.
So you can maybe recalibrate and not over-index on them, or not under-index on them. So that was kind of fun. That was just for me, it was just like, whoop, yeah. It felt a little bit like you were, say if you've got your phone in a backpack and you're walking along and it starts buzzing. It was a bit like that, but it was inside your stomach.
And could they turn off the buzzing after a bit?
It lasts for about an hour.
Okay.
And then you just have to assume that it comes out.
And
they say, we don't give you a
start buzzing.
no, but these technologies have been used for other things as well. There's other cool experiments where they've got different sensors in these capsules, and they go in and they sort of test temperature and pH for things like. So there was a really interesting study looking at the relationship between being disgusted because you need to throw up and being disgusted by something morally wrong. Like, and how are those the same and how are they different in the stomach? And they are the same in that there's a change in acidity and there's a change in temperature, but the kind of moral one is sort of like a lower level. Like the actual physical disgust is much stronger reaction, but the moral disgust is the same thing.
That's crazy.
It's kind of really interesting. So when you say somebody, oh, he may be sick, he really does make you sick.
It's like excitement and fear when you have fight or flight, the sort of crossover between the two, because actually a lot of the physiological responses are very similar, and you can confuse them, which I suppose is exactly what we're talking about here. It is this not necessarily being able to interpret well what the signals inside you are telling you. And you're saying that it seems with these experiments, but that ultimately with our interoception, it's a bit like homeostasis. We want to have a kind of a nice middle ground for everything to be working well. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. In fact, the whole reason that we have interoception at all is because homeostasis. Yeah, because to survive in the world, the way I think of it is like you think of Mother Earth. Well, it's not Mother Earth because she just wants to be fretting about whether you've got a coat on and whether you've had enough to eat and all that kind of. Like, Mother Earth doesn't do that. Mother Earth couldn't care less. The way that life has existed on Earth because it found a way to buffer what's going on the outside in the inside of our bodies. And so that's what these interoceptive signals are for. They're telling us something about the world and what we have to do to get back into balance. So it's all about survival and picking up on something.
So let's talk a little bit about how movement and interoception shape each other. So the relationship between them, because obviously in my work particularly, I really try to get people particularly to respond to how they feel either during or after moving, to focus in on feeling better, because often we will feel better, and yet if we don't tune into that, we're then not feeding our brain with the information of, well, this is good to do, I feel better, I might want to do it again, because it's difficult to form new habits. And this is a really good example of how it's such an important network ultimately. So tell us a bit about that relationship.
Yeah, well, I guess it's even to the point of knowing that your body needs to move. So one of the things, and I mentioned it briefly in the book, but it's always stuck with me from about, 15-16 years ago. I remember I was just getting into yoga. I started really enjoying it. And I was at the end of a class feeling amazing. And the teacher said, okay, for the last pose of the class, I'd like to invite you to do whatever your body is calling for. So maybe you want to do a twist, maybe you want to do an inversion, just do whatever your body needs. And I was just really annoyed and irritated and completely clueless. I was like, well, how am I supposed to know what my body needs? You're the teacher. That's why I came for you. You tell me what my body needs. And I was really annoyed. But looking back now, having done a lot more yoga and written Move and all that kind of thing, I get it. She was saying, okay, well, just think what's
Tune
missing.
in.
Tune in. Are you tight in the shoulders? Do you feel like you need to stretch? Do you need to do something? Do you need some strength? What do you need to do? And I think, and you have to experience that through doing some kind of movement, that whatever movement it is, whatever speaks to you. You have to experience that to then know what your body needs. And so a lot of people, I guess, don't. You can feel lethargic and think, oh, I just need to go to sleep. Do you though? Do you need to walk around the block?
Yes, what will make you feel better? Yeah.
And so be able to check in and say, oh, well, how do my legs feel? How does my how do my muscles feel? How does my face feel? That's a good thing to do, to check in and see how things are going, because then you can look back later and say, okay, fine, it was worth getting off my arse and going out and doing something.
And then there's the broader perspective of not just how your musculature, your musculoskeletal stuff feels, but also the connection between movement and how that then affects emotions and focus and so on, which obviously you talked a lot more about in Move as well. But to understand a bit more about how interoception can help us to regulate ultimately. So the self-regulation you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to be used to your body in lots of different states. So if you're sedentary all the time, then you only know your body in a kind of like low energy state. Whereas if you're used to being active, then you have a sense of everything activating and being on this plane and then coming down afterwards. And so you sort of know it is a fluctuation. So then if something happens, you've had embodied experience. That's the thing. You know how things feel, and you know that this is not necessarily a bad thing or a dangerous thing, and so you can put things into context, which is part of there's one of the things that is important in interoception is that the brain's role in it is predicting what's going on and what it means and interpreting what it means. And so that bit, it has to be learnt, or it can be learnt and then needs to be unlearned. So you can learn like unhelpful predictions. So in things like panic disorder, you hear something, and if you've been in a war zone, the prediction is explosion, badness.
Response.
Everything goes. Whereas if your prediction is sort of been made in a sort of leafy suburb, you'll think, oh, a car's backfired. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, so sometimes you need to relearn these associations, and that's what a lot of some of these therapies are trying to do, to relearn the associations, not just mentally but also in the embodied reactions, and sort of learning to tolerate changes in the body as well.
So how can you change your interoception? What ability, what tools have we got that we can affect our perception, our ability to look inward like that?
Well, yeah. So there's a lot of therapeutic tools and drugs and therapies and all kinds of things like that are kind of coming down the line. But right now, part of the battle is knowing that it's a thing, that it exists, and that and taking the time to sort of notice how you feel in your body, as well as just all this. There's been a lot of talk about mindfulness and like seeing your thoughts float by like clouds. But what I think is quite a good thing to do, there's fewer of them out there on YouTube and whatever, but body-based meditations, somatically based meditations, they encourage you to think, how do I feel in my body right now? How even just a simple body scan, you're noticing your body as a part of you. So there's that as a tool that people can use. There's things like the random check-in I found quite useful. So you can get apps to do this, or you can just kind of make a note to notice whenever. But you can every now and again, okay, so what's going on with me? Because you might feel tense and be carrying on and not really think about where that tension is coming from. Is it because you're really stressed and you've got a deadline? Is it because you're a bit hungry?
Or you need a wee?
Is it because you need a wee?
Yeah, and
I mean, are you a bit hot? What's going on? And so every now and again, just having a check-in. Why am I? What's going on here? And it's not even about sort of being right or wrong. It's just being curious. What's going on? What's going on? And then just checking in. And then it may be like, okay, this thing is really bothering me because I haven't done it and it's driving me nuts. If you just go and do it and then come back again, problem solved. And then, or it might be. Yeah, it might be something simple, like you need a wee, or you need a glass of water, or whatever. So just making the time to maybe notice
And
what's going on.
and then other things like, for example, breath work, cold dipping, where we're really firing up our internal systems. I mean, something like particularly cold water. When you get into cold water, my goodness, you certainly know about your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no choice but to. You've got to connect to your breathing to calm back down. And then obviously the sensations within you of the temperature. Ironically, with cold water, you get skin that feels like it's on fire after a while, so it's sort of confusing. So all those things, are they beneficial?
Well, so I think where we are with all that stuff is that, yeah, if it works, there is evidence that it can be beneficial. I've written several articles and edited about cold water swimming. I still don't do it myself because that's not the way that I choose to get my calmness. But yeah, it certainly gives you a hyper awareness of your body.
Yeah.
I don't know. So one thing that worries me, I do know a lot of people, including my husband, that does it. My worry is that, sometimes people go in and then aren't aware that they're getting dangerous levels of cold, and then you can come out, you can cause yourself problems.
Absolutely.
So
You've got to be educated for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Totally agree.
And just jumping in thinking that's going to be slowly does it.
And actually, when we were at the lake once, there was a group of younger people there who were clearly not ready for what they're about to do. We were more experienced swimmers nearby, so we just kept an eye on them. They did have a couple of people, I think, who were leading it, who were more experienced, but one girl got out and she became hypothermic very quickly. We had to, we all had to watch her. They did have some sort of foil blankets put over her, so they did have things ready, but the timing wasn't being checked, and it is absolutely it can be very dangerous if it's something that you literally just throw yourself into, but it can also be very beneficial for certain
I'm kind of on the fence
symptoms.
on it because I can see that there are definitely benefits, clearly, but I think there are also dangers because if you're not feeling that you're getting cold on the inside because the sensations from your skin are so overwhelming and you're concentrating on your breathing and stay in slightly too long, I think you've got to be a little bit careful about whether or not you notice those danger signals and act on them.
And whether your interoception, whether you are quite sensitive to that or not, whereas and you might not know whether you are or not beforehand. So
and whether you're
context.
And also whether you're the type of person that notices and then ignores. So the kind of on that Maya scale I was talking about, the trusting. So you might notice something, but you just think, oh, it's fine. And things like with athletes, that overtraining is a thing because athletes. Right. There's been studies that they are more sensitive, more interoceptively aware than non-athletes. But on the flip side of that, they have a tendency to notice it and then ignore it and push through. Because if you want to improve your performance, you sort of can't go, oh, my legs hurt, I'm tired, I'll stop. You have to push through. But then there's a danger of pushing through too far. And then you end up sort of overdoing it and sapping your energy levels to the point where you're more likely to get colds and injuries won't heal because your immune system hasn't got enough in the tank because you've used it all for exercise. And so there's this balance to be struck. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've also talked a little bit in the book about the societal level, which I think is really, really fascinating, because obviously we've been talking on quite a micro level about whether you can feel it or not, what movement does to shape it, and to sort of learn a bit more about it from our own personal systems perspective. But we have touched on emotions, emotional regulation, and so to explain a bit more about your thoughts on how it could be affecting us on a societal level.
Well, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that the last few years, decade or whatever, has been a bit of a ride emotionally. You got pandemics, you got leaders of the free world talking about, well, World War III, just like it's a throwaway comment, and there's kind of climate change and all this stuff going on. So it's a very emotionally charged social, political environment that we're in at the moment, and everything from social media, where everything's just got to be polarized and everyone's got to shout at each other. The thing is, if we are not sufficiently sort of aware of what's going on inside us and these emotional sensations, and if we just ignore them, and we've got a very um information rich, overwhelmed, sensory overwhelmed world, and you can just quite easily just go and distract yourself from all these kind of churning feelings on the inside that things aren't quite right in the world at the moment.
Mm.
If we do that, then there's a possibility that we can be led around by our emotions without us really realizing what's going on, because some of these interoceptive signals, some of them are obvious, we can sense them. Some of them are kind of more, they're like the background music to our lives, really. They sort of go on in the background and they make us feel and think and act in certain ways, and we may or may not be aware of them, or we're sort of borderline aware of them. And so having a bit of insight into what we're feeling and what's triggering it can, I think, help buffer some of this madness that's around us. Like, why am I feeling like this? Why do I believe that person over that person? What's in that? So things like, if you read the same news story in, I don't know, the Guardian, the Daily Mail, look at them, how two different outlets with different views are reporting the same thing. Which one feels like it speaks to you, which doesn't, and which one makes you angry, and which one makes you galvanized to do something about it for the world? What they're making you feel and why is a good thing to be curious about in this day and age, because otherwise you end up feeling this rage and fear and uncertainty, and it has nowhere to go, and you can't make any sense of it.
And so, to pull back a little bit, you're talking a lot there about emotions. And so tell us in a bit more detail about the link between our interoception and emotions.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason, as I said, with sort of homeostasis, and the whole reason that these sensations are there is to tell us about something. Well, emotions exist to give us information that something isn't right and needs fixing, and so they're not the same thing as emotions, because, as you say, you can be activated and be anxious, or you can be excited. So that the interpretation of it comes in here as well. So, but these sensations, can you imagine being scared or happy or in love or safe, or without something happening in your body? So this is all, this is part of it, a really important part of it. And so, but if we're numb to that, and if we ignore it and choose to push it aside and say, oh, no, I'm not interested in that, then we're missing out on a very important part of the thing. You can be angry about something when actually you're not really realizing what you're angry about, or what this is making you. Is it making you feel unsafe? Is it, what is it? And so I think,
and then the other way around, what is it then doing to your physiology if you're allowing it to become pervasive? You're not letting it out, you're not sort of diagnosing and dissecting it, then you can embody it, and that can then go on to cause problems.
Yeah, I mean, stress is really, so there's a researcher called Manos Zakiris who's based in London, and he has set up a Centre for the Emotion of Politics. He's interoceptive. He's done loads of work on interoception, and his argument is that stress-related illnesses are a huge problem in our society, and you've got all this stressful stuff going on in the world, and that we really need to put these things together and try and find a way forward that takes into account what it's doing to us health-wise and emotionally, and all these kinds of things. And he's very into interoception as a key part of that.
And hasn't the WHO even said at some point that the biggest epidemic of modern times is stress?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I haven't heard that directly, but yeah, I mean,
I don't know if that's absolutely accurate, but it's certainly something I've heard.
It's completely plausible,
and it makes sense, because what is that doing to us for our entire general health ultimately? Yeah,
it's a huge problem, and regulation is a huge part of this. And so there's some really interesting research as well I came across, where for police officers, it's the Dutch police force that are doing this. They have stress is a real problem, because if you're a police officer, you're going into dangerous situations and you have to override your natural stress responses and stay calm and just push all that down. And so stress related illness is a real problem. And there's this really cool intervention where they hook people up through a chest monitor, like people who go running wear. And it's hooked up to a interactive game where it's like a VR game where they have a little pretend gun and they're going around shooting zombies in a car park, basically. And the chest band is measuring heart rate variability, measure of stress. And so if they are controlling their heart rate variability with their breathing, the car park they're trying to shoot the zombies in becomes lighter, so it becomes easier. If they're letting stress get on top of them, it gets darker and it gets... So they have to learn to control their levels of stress whilst in a stressful environment.
Yeah.
And it seems to be like a really effective thing. People love the police officers love doing it. They have performed better on various tests at the end of it. And it just struck me, partly because I have a teenage son, that this is something that kids could really benefit from. It's something interactive, it's engaging, it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's teaching them to regulate their emotions.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's all kinds of things like that's going on that you wouldn't, you would never really think of, that could help us all to kind of take charge of some of these signals.
Yeah. Well, and so that's one example of how you can enhance or down-regulate your interoceptive ability. So what about movement practices? Do you ever advocate any specific types of movement that can help us to enhance our awareness?
I think with anything to do with movement, the answer is whatever you will do. I mean, obviously getting more movement into everyday life, which is, what you do so well, the more the better. But whatever you're going to keep up with. So things like yoga are great because they sort of involve breath work and strength and stretching, and you're sort of focusing on your body in a controlled manner. But I mean, that doesn't work for everybody. So another one can be climbing, because you're thinking about your strength and you're thinking, it's like proper brain body workout. Am I going to fall to my death? No, I'm going to hold myself up. And you have to plan and think and all these things. So it's really whatever speaks to you, I think. Basically.
And one last thing I wanted to ask about was, you mentioned the vagus nerve at the beginning. What was it that you called it in terms of interoception highway? Was it?
Superhighway, yeah. So it's really interesting, because most what people know about the vagus nerve is that it's the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, and that it's rest and digest, and that when we activate it, it calms everything down. But what isn't really quite so well known is that you've got the vagus nerve is like a bundle of 100,000 fibers, and 20% of them are the parasympathetic rest and digest ones. The other 80% are sensory interoceptive nerves that go body to brain, and they're carrying information. And so it's hugely important. Not as much is known about it in that way, but it's everything from relaying messages from the microbes in our stomach to our brain, and to what the nutritional content of what's in our stomach to the brain, to the amount of pressure in our chests as we breathe in and out. This is all being sent and going into this sort of this conversation about how things are going below the neck. The vagus nerve is a hugely important thing on that. And so there's loads of research to look at breaking down which nerves are going where. So there's a lot about vagus nerve stimulation at the moment, with the idea being that you can just stimulate it, calm, job done.
Job's a good one, yeah.
But it's not quite that simple, because especially with the non-invasive ones, because they tend to clip onto the ear here, where there's a branch of the vagus nerve that comes quite close to the surface. It's kind of tricky, because when you just stimulate the whole nerve, you don't know whether you're stimulating the bottom up ones, or which presumably from the ear was just been saying there's a tingly thing on your ear, which is that doing anything? I don't know. Or are you doing it the parasympathetic ones, or are you doing both? How much of it is actually getting scattered by the cartilage and the skin and everything? How much actually reaches the vagus nerve? So it's all a little bit, I wouldn't quite say a shot in the dark, but I think there are more effective ways of doing it, such as resonance breathing in for 5 breaths, out for 5 breaths, which It's a very complicated feedback loop in the chest, where when you breathe in, the chest expands and the blood pressure drops and the heart rate increases, and then you breathe out and the opposite happens. And this back and forth, it takes about 5 seconds for the blood pressure to respond to
Right.
the pressure. And so if you're breathing in and out sort of 6 breaths per minute, it's sort of catching it in that. So a bit like when you've got a child on the swing, and if you push them just at the right moment, you can get more
Yes.
from less effort. It's sort of doing that to the system of, like, it's kind of enhancing this system of getting the rest and digest. So to me, rather than going out and buying a thing to stick on your ear, I think you're much better off doing some breathing.
Some breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of, it's there's lots to learn about the vagus nerve, and there's all kinds of interesting experiments with vagus nerve stimulation by the stomach for appetite control in obesity and
Oh.
things like that. So there's lots that's going to come out, but yeah, so it's not as simple as it was,
Yeah.
or as a lot of people think it is, but it's fascinating.
And one more thing, talking about the stomach and the gut, the one other little story that I'd love you to just share is the hostage negotiation
Yeah.
part, because and his ability to sense changes by his gut. So if you can, because that is really
Yeah,
fascinating.
it is really fascinating. Yeah, this guy Chris, he's well, he's not anymore, but he was for many years a hostage negotiator. Worked for the Met Police. He went all around the world, like in the rooms. Basically, if anything went down and you needed somebody to talk to somebody in a stressful situation, he was your man. And he says that well, you'd think that in that job you would need to be very calm, and that emotions wouldn't come into it, and you would just need to just have a cool, calm head. But when he was tested by Sarah Garfinkel again, to do how his heart rate awareness, so how accurate he was at feeling his own heartbeat. Most people score at about 60% on this, being able to feel their heartbeat.
Mhm.
I'm rank average, a little bit below. He was like 100%. He could, and he says, I was talking to him and he said, I can always feel it. He said, even sitting here now, I can feel it. And it surprised me that other people don't. And so he's incredibly sensitive. And he'll say that when he's in a negotiation situation, he'll just get a sense that something's not right, or something's changed, or something that you said didn't land right. And it's hard for him to say what that thing is. But he'll say, you might notice a slight change in your blood pressure, or like a twinge in your gut. You really feel there's something changed. So he's very sensitive to these kind of borderline conscious, unconscious signals that tell us something is wrong. And then he can use that to pick his moment. Because
To
if you
go
go in
in.
too early and try and negotiate with somebody, it will backfire. If you leave it too long, you've missed your chance. But yeah, he said he's very sensitive to that moment when it becomes.
And I wonder if he was always like that, or if by doing the job that he's done for so many years, he became more in tune because there was an inkling of that in what he was doing. He noticed it within himself and tuned into that, and it was beneficial. I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, from talking to him, he says that, not everybody has that, even in his line of work. And you can generally spot the people that have it and don't. And there's another similar line of work, also Sarah Garfinkel again, she does some amazing work, with people on the trading floor, financial traders. I mean, I don't think it's done quite the same way in the pit anymore, where you had to make quick
No, I
decisions.
don't think it is.
But the traders that were making split-second decisions on whether to invest or sell, they were much higher than average on this heartbeat detection test as well. So they were like 80%. So not quite Chris White, but sort of somewhere in between. And the ones who were better or more sensitive were the ones who stayed in the job for longest, presumably because they hadn't got burnt out, because they were just like, yeah, I can do this, I can do this. And, it's decided to, like, oh, good trade, bad trade. Yeah, that feels good. That doesn't. And one of the people who worked on that study used to be a trader, is now a scientist. And he says that even now, he, when he's looking through his data, his scientific data, he'll be able to feel that there's something there before he actually crunches the numbers and finds it out. And it's sort of gut feely. And he's like, it's difficult to know what it is. But these two people are actually very different. The trader, I was saying, are you very sensitive to your emotions? He's like, no, emotion has nothing to do with it. Didn't even want to go there. The negotiator, on the other hand, he was like, oh yeah, in everyday life, I'm almost too sensitive. And he said to me, never go out for dinner with a group of hostage negotiators, because they will never decide where to eat, because they're all too busy, like, oh, I can feel this, I can feel that, oh, that could, and they kind of, but in a situation where you just have to be, and he says, in a situation where everybody else is losing their head and it's all going horribly wrong, he's able to go,
they're in.
no, he's in. So it's really interesting. I think, like
Yeah.
everything is a double-edged sword sometimes, but
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's so funny. So this is all very new. And this is perfect time for your book to come out. It's going to be, I'm sure, read by lots of people. It's very, very interesting, and it'll make them think about themselves. What's the main aim with this book for you? Is it more focused on individuals, or have you got a sort of a wider part to play, do you think?
well, I mean, it's everything from getting people to know that this is a thing, that things that you think and feel happen through your whole body, and that there's things you can do with that information, and there's it can help you, everything, because our ability to feel our own internal sensations is linked to empathy. So it's like relationships between people, how sensitive you are to how people are feeling, socially, as we've talked about with mental health. There's things like studies into hypermobility, where there is links emerging that with hypermobility and anxiety, for physiological reasons that I won't go into, because I know you're trying to wrap up. But anyway, there's a reasons why, if hypermobile people have a heart that races more than the normal, but maybe they haven't twigged that that's what's going on, and that's an unexplored part of what's going on that could be really easily helped or fixed. So there's everything from sort of like body mind health issues that there's a new avenue that people need to know about. This new overarching vision of the mind as being more than just what's in your head. I think that's really important to get out there. And also that it's important for our society, us as individuals. I just want to get it out there, because as you know, it's
absolutely key.
It's not really, and then hopefully, I don't know, I like to think of 10, 15 years ago, nobody knew about the microbiome apart from a handful of science journalists. I knew about it, because I was reading scientific papers, but the general public had nobody knew about that. No one was that interested. And I kind of feel like interoception's sort of there now. So, when I've been writing this book, people have said, what are you writing about? And I say interoception, and you could see them glazing over. I'm like, you will know about it soon. And and as soon as I started talking about it, they'd say, wow, that's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense. And I kind of feel like that's where we are now, that it's going to be something people know about.
I completely, yes, I absolutely agree. No, I do, because it also makes sense of a lot of things. And a bit like going back to the way that you write the book, it's every time that we learn more through science, through experience, the jigsaw puzzle comes together in a slightly different way, and we get a slightly different picture that moves us on in our thinking. It questions other things. It makes other things not seem as they were. But that's what we need, isn't it? We need to be constantly developing and layering. And, you've done that beautifully in this book. And if it creates lots of conversation, that is absolutely the best thing. So,
yeah, well, I hope so.
Yes.
You never know how these things are going to go. You wave it off into the world and hope for the best. But yeah, I'm hoping it strikes a nerve. It feels like a time in our history where we're willing to note that, the body-mind connection is, it's never been more obvious to us. I think it's staring us in the face, and it is beginning to change in science and medicine as well. So hopefully these things will all move along together.
Exactly. Well, I wish you the best of luck with it. And
thank you.
So it's on pre-sales now. So let everyone know how they can grab a copy.
Yeah, well, wherever you get your books from, you can pre-order, and it will arrive it comes out on the 3rd of April, so it will arrive on your doorstep hopefully the next day. So yes, pre-orders are very welcome. Yes, otherwise it's out 3rd of April in the UK. I think it's going to be out, they've told me, in the fall in the US. I don't know when exactly, but it's coming soon there as well. But
Superb.
Yes,
Well done.
coming soon.
Brilliant book, and really lovely to have you on here chatting about some of the concepts, but we scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I expected to talk about a lot more, but it's amazing how little you can cover. So go and read the book.
Yes, please do. There's lots in the book.
Thank you so much for your time, Caroline. Really grateful.
Thank you. See you soon.
Yes. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.